Online for Authors. I'm chatting with JD Rasch, author of the Quasi-Crystal. Welcome, Jody.
Glad to be here.
I am super excited to have you. I loved the book, and we'll get into why that's a little bit phenomenal because I'm not a big fantasy reader. But before we jump into the story and talk a little bit about, the hows and the whys, can you give us a quick elevator pitch as to what readers are going to find when they open up the cover of the Quasi-Crystal?
Yeah, sure. And, I was thinking about that question, and rather than me coming up with something, there were a couple of reviews I had on the book that I thought really said it well. So
Super.
One of them said, "This novel is a mesmerizing blend of fantasy, mystery, and philosophical exploration." And then the other one that I liked was the Wanderer series, which this is part of, is a masterful blend of literary fantasy, science, and adventure. So I think that's what people will see when they open up the book.
Absolutely. I want to know why you chose to write fantasy.
Well, I had originally thought about writing prose, and I thought about what I would write. And it really came down to everyone should just stop being mean to each other.
Right.
So that didn't seem like it could carry over to a whole book. So I started thinking about, well, how can I get to the issues and explore the issues that I want? And fantasy seemed like the best medium to get there because you can make up the situations that you want and put your characters in different situations and then see how they react. And with a broad range of characters, you can actually explore a lot of different alternatives.
Absolutely. And, it's one of the reasons why I enjoy writing historical fiction is for that same reason, where you're exploring things, but in not today's reality. And
Right.
So it's not as scary for people. They can read about things like racism or be nice to everybody, right? But it doesn't feel like an indictment because you're talking about the past and you're talking about a fantastical world. And so somehow it's like people can digest that easier without feeling like maybe someone's pointing a finger directly at them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love historical fiction as well. So.
Do you? Okay. Yeah. So it's a series. It's the Wanderer series. The thing that was surprising to me is that I started on book 3. So I had not read book 1 or book 2 and still have not at this point. And I didn't feel lost. And I felt very much I could tell there were a couple of places that I could tell that, oh, this has happened, but it didn't feel uncomfortable to me that I didn't know all of the details. I want to know how you do that. As an author myself, when I'm done with a book, I'm done. I don't even know how to do this series thing. And you did it so well that I read book 3 and did not feel like I had missed out enough that it hurt my reading experience.
Yeah.
So how do you go back and do that?
It's a little bit by design because each book explores a somewhat different concept.
Okay.
So books 1 and 2 were really more social and political. Book 3 did some of that, but it also brought in scientific elements to it. And also, I was very careful that in book 3, even though there's some overlapping characters, what I liked about it, and which was actually a lot of fun to write, is I took characters who were minor characters in book 1 and 2 and made them the major characters. So it wasn't like you needed to know a lot about them because they didn't have that much of a history. They were just kind of fleeting characters in the first, but then, they come to life and they have their own stories that get to be told in the subsequent books.
Absolutely. I really, in particular, I had 2 characters that I really liked. Let me look here. Palm and Theb. And I think the reason why I liked them the most was because they weren't really looking for a quest. They were doing their thing, and all of a sudden the quest kind of came to them. and they found themselves like, on this adventure. Who are your favorite characters?
I mean, I like Pom and Theb as well. I mean, they're kind of the major characters in this book, so that was by design. I kind of liked them in books 1 and 2, but they had such small parts that I felt like they should have more. And then, the Wanderer, that she's always been one of my favorites. I like, she's kind of like the guiding light,
right,
between all the different books. So she's kind of an important character.
Absolutely. How difficult is it to create a world? Like with historical fiction, you don't create the world. You go and research the world and then you write about it. And with a fantasy novel, you have to kind of create it. What is that like?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, if we look at historical fiction or something that's done in the real world, in certain ways it's easier, but in certain ways it's harder. I can't see, like, if you're writing about someone who lives in Baltimore, I mean, I'm in New York, but Baltimore, like, I don't know, I've been there, but I don't know that much about it. And now you're dealing with something that's real, that if you're not accurate, I could see someone reading it in Baltimore saying, that street doesn't go there.
Right.
So you have a lot more restrictions. In fantasy, no one's been there, so no one can tell you you're wrong. You make up all the rules. And so in that way, it's easier. The more difficult part is you have a blank slate and you've got to create it from scratch. But that's also fun. So I actually find it easier to write fantasy than it is to write about things that are actually there and you have to follow those rules.
So one of the reasons I tend not to be a big fantasy reader is that the worlds sometimes take over. And I don't feel like we get much into characters, and it feels very much about the world. And I want to know what the characters are doing. I'm very character driven when I write. I'm very character driven when I read. Your book, it has a world, and it's part of the thing, but you have very strong characters. And I think that's one of the reasons why I found this book to be I enjoyed it. Like, I really liked this idea. Do you like writing characters? Does that come naturally to you?
Yeah, I mean, I prefer writing characters because what I'm really doing is kind of exploring what I think.
Yeah.
So, the characters are, what I use to do that. And one of the things that always bothered me about most fantasy, there are obviously exceptions, but everything was always big battles and
yes.
big groups and and it just like, okay, there are battles. I'm not into battles. It just seems like there's so much more you could do with fantasy because you control all the different levers with that. And in a lot of ways, what I really did is I took a scientific approach to writing where you come up with a hypothesis and then you try that out. It's kind of like what Einstein did with thought experiments. And each of my characters in the vignettes they find themselves in, they're all thought experiments. Like, what if a character was faced with this situation? How would they react? What's, in terms of the level of reaction, what's a good reaction? What's kind of like the best reaction that none of us are ever really going to do? And then different characters respond differently. That's why, when you mentioned characters like Theb, they're the more realistic characters in a lot of ways. They're the ones who, act like we would act, as opposed to some of the other characters who are more pure.
Right. And I think that's another reason why I enjoyed the book, was because a lot of the characters did act more like I would act. And I didn't even mind the ones who were more pure, because those are the characters that you wish you could act like.
Right.
I tell people all the time when I'm writing characters that they often have me in them. And it's me as I was, me as I am, or me as I wish I was.
Yeah.
You know, and that's kind of, so it sounds like you do something similar.
Yeah, it was the idea, probably back in high school, we were reading Shakespeare, Hamlet. And I remember the teacher saying, Falstaff, the character is us, because he can be goofy, he can not know things, he can be clueless. And that's the us character. That's what allows us access inside the book, or in that case, inside the play.
Right.
And I always kind of remember that. And I try to have enough Falstaff characters in there so people can relate to the other characters and the situations.
Right. Because we want characters that are different from us, but we also want characters that are relatable enough that we feel comfortable in a situation where it's like, okay, there's at least one person in here who reacts the way I might.
Yes.
You know, so that you don't feel like somehow you're left out of the group. Right.
And it's also, you don't want everyone to think that, well, everyone has to be pure, you know, no one can actually be real. And, you know, then the book is just boring.
Right.
Too preachy.
Right. Well, too preachy or sometimes too flat. The very first manuscript that I wrote, my characters were perfect. They were absolutely perfect. If something bad happened to them, they knew exactly what to do and knew when to do it. And they just did it. And it was fabulous, except that when you went back and read it, it was horrible. And I realized that I needed a character that would react more human, you know, like real.
Yes.
The kind of thing that happens to you or I when we're faced with a situation, and sometimes we make the right decision and sometimes we don't.
Yeah. Characters have to be relatable or else people are just going to phase out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. How many of your characters like go through all three of your books?
Good question. Didn't count them up, but obviously, you know, probably half a dozen, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, but you know, their roles may be less in the subsequent books than they are in the first one. So it's not like Harry Potter where you have all the characters going through all this.
Well, and speaking of like a Harry Potter, that would be a harder one to start with book 4.
Yes.
Like you really would be lost. You'd have no idea what was happening and you have to go back to the beginning. Whereas I think because of the method that you use of taking side characters and bringing them forward, you sometimes get clues that we should have met this person before, but it doesn't feel awkward that we haven't.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was good, especially for me, given that I started on book 3. I'm really glad that it worked that way and that I
can always go back to books 1 and 2.
Well, yeah. So let's talk just briefly about 1 and 2. What is the title of 1 and what is the title of 2 and kind of what is their premise?
Yeah. So actually it's The Silver Forest and it's book 1 and 2.
Okay.
And the reason why it's 2 books, actually, we're in the process of combining them back together. Because the reason why they were book 2 was explained to me by the editor that I use, who's very experienced in the field. He worked for a lot of big publishing houses. He had been an editor for Stephen King and others as well. And he basically said, as a first-time author, and originally, before I went to self-publishing, I was sending the manuscript out to more traditional publishers.
Right.
But he basically said, after a certain number of words, it becomes incrementally more expensive to print. And if you're a first-time author, which I was, then it's very difficult to get any publisher to take the book because the cost is just so high.
Right.
So we said, okay.
And you're an unknown, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the question was, is there a logical spot within the book to break it into 2 parts? So we found somewhere to do that. But in my mind, it was always 1 book. So now it's being combined back together. Actually, we just had, it's being turned into an audio book. So had a very lovely English woman who became the narrator of that. And I think she did a fantastic job. So that's going to be coming out in the first quarter. But again, you know, like I said, this was an exploration of social and political themes, like why we act the way we do. I mean, it's very relevant to what's going on right now, where we let all these outside influences of religion and politics influence us rather than kind of being able to ignore that and understand what we really think and why we think that. And that's a recurring theme through all the books, is that all the characters, the main characters who have an idea or have a philosophy, they don't want other characters to take their philosophy. They want them to come to what they think, what they feel. And so there's always that little tension is like, oh, what you say is great. He says, no, don't listen to me. You figure it out.
You figure it out. Well, some of the things that I found were like, humans are humans. You know, I mean, that was one of the things I thought of. And that another one is that we create excuses for what we want to do. So no matter what we want to do, we'll find an excuse as to why that's the right thing to do. Like we're going to excuse ourselves for whatever it is that we're setting out to do. And then another one I thought was really interesting is we always have a choice.
Right.
You know, you can't say, well, I didn't have any, no, you always have a choice. And so those were three things that I saw. I also found it interesting. There was one point in the plot where I believe it's Palm is looking at like which group she's going to most closely associate with. Right. And some of the groups, they're almost identical, except for maybe one prays facing one way and one prays facing another way. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I thought that was just so telling about like the differences between them were minor. They were almost laughable.
Yeah. Well,
and I felt like that was the whole point. Was that they were laughable. Like we do this to ourselves all the time. Like we're separating ourselves into groups over things like, do you put pineapple on your pizza? Right? Like some things just don't matter.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I sort of got the idea. I don't know if you're a Star Trek enthusiast, but going back to the original Star Trek, they had one episode where they were at a planet where these two groups were fighting each other, and they were half their face was white and the other half was black. And it was like, well, you go through the whole episode, it's like, what's the difference? Well, one group, it's black on the right side, and the other group, it's black on the left side.
I do remember that.
It's like just pointing out, just these differences that don't matter, but somehow become important.
Right. And so I'm assuming then that this really was like part of your goal, in addition to, hey, let's write a book that people really enjoy, that you really were pushing to get people to start thinking about these kinds of things. Is that correct?
Absolutely. That was the main goal for it. Yeah.
Yeah. So what made you decide this was going to be your lot in life, that you were not only going to just be an author, but that you were going to like push these kinds of ideas out into the world?
Well, it's actually the other way around. I wanted to push these type of ideas out into the world, but I wanted to do it in a way that was digestible and interesting to people. Right. So I want to make sure the book is not preachy.
Right.
So I would show it around to a lot of people and, say, does this sound preachy or not? And if it did, we change things around with that.
Right.
But yeah, so the social aspect of the book came first. And when I do write the books, I actually start with what message do I want to give? And then figuring out, I have to have that, the beginning, the end, and then writing it becomes easy because it's just connecting the beginning to the end. But you basically have your moral fiber in there as to what drives the quests and what drives the characters.
So Jody, what made you decide that was going to be that's what you wanted to do, was to get out there with that moral fiber and give that to people? What made you decide to do that over, I don't know, accounting?
Interesting you should say accounting, because my background is actually international finance.
Oh, isn't that hysterical? I just guessed. I mean, I was just saying something, right?
So it wasn't either or. It's actually, in my case,
it's actually both.
Yes. I'm also a painter, by the way. So that's
okay.
mixed in with that as well.
All right. All right. So when it comes to the painting, like, are you really involved in your covers, or do you let somebody else take control of that?
Yeah, I let someone else take control of that because the type of painting that I do is very different. And, it's interesting that the covers do signal something to potential readers.
Yeah,
What's a fantasy cover? What type is it? Epic
exactly.
fantasy is
Right.
so, it's not so much, gee, I want to create a cover that's beautiful. It's you have to create a cover that's beautiful and also communicates something. And, there are people who are professional in that, so I let them do.
You let them
that.
do their thing. So
Yeah.
I'm just curious now, what kind of painting do you do?
It's all science related, so it takes the metaphors of science and then we then look at, how that relates to us. I just finished an MFA program, did a lot of work on talking about the artwork. And, the thing that I kept on coming back to was Immanuel Kant and this concept of sublime, which is looking for something that's bigger than ourselves, that we can relate to, that creates a sense of awe. So that's what I try to do. And I use science imagery to try to do that. And it's not that different than what I'm trying to do in the books as well.
Fantastic. I love that you have so many different creative outlets. And then it just makes me laugh that you're also in accounting. So
Finance, not accounting.
the financing, but still, like, I pulled that out of the hat,
Okay.
right? Tell me a little bit about your writing life. Do you write every day? Are you one of these people that get up and you write a certain time every day, or are you a little more freeform about it?
I'm very freeform about it. So first, it's like right now I'm working on I guess what would be for now the fourth book.
Okay.
And so that now I just got it back from the copy editor, so it's a lot of grunt work of going through, looking at their edits and accepting or not, and all that. So that's not a lot of fun. But once I start writing, I try to do something every day, and I have a goal like. You got to do like at least 3 pages.
Okay.
And because I figure if you do 3 pages a day, in a month, you've written 90 pages.
Right.
And then so it makes it much more manageable when you break it out. And a lot of times I'll do obviously a lot more, and sometimes I'll take off for that. But in between books, which I'm trying to figure out what would be the fourth book the fifth book in the series, which would be the last in this series. Okay. So I'm trying those elements that I said before about the beginning and the end and what the moral issue, I'm still kind of working those out. But once I get that, then I like writing, every day if I can. But, the goal rather than time is number of pages. Did I get 3 pages done? If I did, I can then keep going or say, okay, I'm done for the day.
I'm done for the day. Okay. All right. Yeah. I tell people I'm a binge writer. I don't write for periods of time. And then all of a sudden it'll be like, oh, I know exactly what I need to write now. And I can sit down and write for hours and hours. And then it's like, no, I don't have anything to say again. And I wander around until I have something else to say. So I'm very, very free form, probably too much for my own good, but it's what works for me. So you've got book number 4, kind of at the copy edit stage.
Right.
You've got book number 5 that you're contemplating, and you think that will be the last one in this series.
Yeah. And then I have another idea for a different series.
That's what I was going to ask. So you do have more ideas and you have a whole nother series coming up. Will it also be fantasy?
Yes. I'm not sure. This one I'm debating whether it's going to be in a totally different world or if it's sort of like Philip Pullman's books where it's in this world, but a little different than this world. So it's an alternate of this world. So I'm trying to figure out which way makes the most sense.
Makes the most sense for you. Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I have a little notebook that ideas will come to me. I can only work on one thing at a time. If I'm trying to work on too much at the same time, I just it all starts to be bad. And so I'll get these ideas and then I write them down in like maybe a quick paragraph. And it's like, okay, now leave me alone because I can't do anything about you. So then when I'm done with a book, it's like, all right, I look through my notebook and say, which of these really piques my interest the most, right?
So you said it was a little notebook. What color is your little notebook?
Yellow.
Mine is aqua.
Okay. My favorite color is yellow. So it's not surprising that it's yellow. But yeah, I just jot little ideas down because they won't leave me alone. But if I jot them down, I can tell them I have you now.
Right.
I'm not going to forget you.
You always tell yourself, I'll remember that. And
I don't.
What is it that I said I was going to remember?
Yeah. Yeah. I actually, when I'm walking on the beach, I often will get an idea and I have an app on my phone that I'll talk it real quickly because I get home and I think I have this fabulous idea and I can't remember it.
Yeah.
I have no idea. And it's like, how does that happen? I mean, it came to me, I had a whole scene and I get home and it's like nothing. I have no idea what
I feel for you. I feel for you.
So yeah, notebooks and my apps definitely help me. Is there anything else you'd like to tell us about your series that I haven't touched on?
Yeah, I mean, just the kind of philosophy of the series. I mean, it's called The Silver Forest. I mean, it's kind of like a return to Eden, how we can recover what we've lost. And I just, would love people to read it and understand the message that I'm trying to give and really use that to be more open and loving and caring with each other.
Yeah, like you said, be kind.
Yeah, there you go. That's the book right there.
Right on down to be kind, folks. Absolutely. So, hey guys, if you want to keep this conversation going, head on over to Novels and Latte Book Club on Facebook. There you will have a chance to win a digital copy of the Quasi-Crystal. You're going to love it. So tell us something you liked or loved from this podcast, and you will be in the running. Jody, if someone wanted to reach out to you, talk to you about your books, about your philosophy, even about your painting, what is the best way to do that? How can they reach you?
Well, I have a website for the book, jdrasch.com. I'm also on Instagram. My art is rash.art. And Jody Rasch is also the Instagram that I use for the book. So any of that, you can get to me, and I have email addresses, or you can DM me from Instagram.
Super. So guys, all of that will be in the show notes. Run out, grab yourself a copy of the book. You're going to love it. Once you're done reading it, make sure you review it, because as authors, we love those reviews. And Jody, I want to thank you so much for being with me today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to Online for Authors, where I, Terry M. Brown, author of character-driven fiction and host of the podcast, introduce readers to characters they'd love to invite to lunch. Tune in next Tuesday for another podcast episode.